With me on the stage is someone you might recognize from the trucker movement. Danny Bulford is a former, he worked in the the VIP protective unit of the RCMP, if I recall, as a sniper spotter.
Yeah, I was on the RCMP's team.
Sure, I got that.
But the majority of our time was spent supporting protection of the PM and other VIPs.
And mandates came down. You made a very difficult and principled decision. You started Police on Guard and now Mounties for Freedom. So did I get that right?
I saw an interview with Chris Vandenbosch, one of the founders of Police on Guard. I registered with them. Through them, I learned about the existence of Mounties for Freedom. So then I focused my time there because it was most applicable to me.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was very, I think, inspiring and encouraging for people to see that there were police who were not thrilled about police being turned into political enforcers. And because it added an era of menace and authoritarianism to public health orders, that, the idea of having police enforce a restaurant closure is absurd.
Yeah.
And then we saw these riot police, and it seemed un-Canadian. And then when the martial law, the form of martial law, the Emergencies Act was declared, I think a lot of people said, is this Canada? How widespread is skepticism within law enforcement? Obviously, not everyone was in a position to quit or retire or go on leave. Or are there a lot of police and Mounties in Canada who quietly were appalled by things, or have they transformed into political cops?
I think that there is, well, I know for a fact there's hundreds of Mounties, so thousands of police officers in general. And from my experience, Ezra, prior to the mandates and even prior to COVID, I don't know any police officer that I've ever encountered and met with that thought that this current government was competent and ethical. And so I believe that there's a great skepticism of the direction of our country. But like you said, people are fearful of losing their job, losing their pension, right? Yeah. Like I've heard multiple times from multiple active serving police officers that they inoculated themselves against unemployment, right? It wasn't, they didn't believe it was the right choice necessarily for themselves, but they did it because they felt they had to keep their job. So they were coerced, right? And quite often it's very common for law enforcement to, have law enforcement officers to have a spouse that's in healthcare, right? Or military, especially in the Ottawa area, in my experience. And so both husband, wife, both people involved in the marriage are under mandates, right? And so that's I get frequently, I've had officers from various police services come to me in private and say, like, thank you for speaking out. I've seen your videos, stuff like that, but they couldn't jeopardize their career.
Yeah, well, right? I mean, very few people were in a position that they could walk away from that situation. It really was a form of coercion. Now, you use the word ethical and competent. You said unethical and incompetent. And I agree with you on those two things. But I think using police to enforce the lockdown went further than just ethics or competence. The role of policing in society. And I want to just speak personally. Mm-hmm. My entire life, for the first 90% of my life, I would call myself a super supporter of police to the point of being irrational. Mm-hmm. Like, almost never would I ever side against the police in any dispute. I would do acrobatics. I would turn myself into a pretzel to support the cause.
Yeah.
In the last few years, I have seen police, and I know it's not all of them. I know that. I'm talking to you. But I saw such widespread abusive policing that almost felt like a glee in enforcing foolishness. Mm-hmm. Yeah, enforcing unethical and incompetent rules. But it was the glee with, and not just in Canada. I saw this in Australia. I saw a little bit of the United Kingdom. Not a lot of it in America, but I saw some. And it shocked me
out of my pro-police default. I'm not saying I'm anti-police. I don't think I am. But I saw so many anecdotes. I think there's a trend. Help me come to terms with what, and I saw it in doctors too, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, doctors were told, you become propagandists or you have your license pulled.
Yeah.
So they were under duress too. What do I do, and what do our viewers do who spent 90% of our lives loving cops, hating the defund police people, hating the Antifa people, and now the police were the ones who were so brutal, the SWAT team style takedown of Arthur Pavlovsky, even the arrest of, Tamara Leach, the peaceful trucker grandma. Help me out. How do I reconcile that? How do I come to terms with that?
That's a hard question because those are the same things I struggle with, right? My post-convoy, my belief in what Canadian police were about and what we were supposed to represent was really shaken. Now, I know because I've worked with so many of them, the vast majority of them are good people that join for the right reasons. Can I share two theories with you? So, number one, you've probably heard Matthias Desmet, and he talks about mass formation.
Yeah.
So I think that definitely I think he's spot on. I think that has taken massive hold.
Compliance and almost like a
Ants, but just sort of you're part of the group, you get lost in the mob almost.
And it's going to be to break that even with evidence. You can show all the evidence in the world, and yet it's still hard to make that breakthrough with people. So I think that's a key factor. And I also think police, first responders were prioritized very early on in the rollout. And what I know of most police officers I work with is very type A personalities, right? And it would be very difficult to look back in retrospect even want to look back at evidence that has come to light now and come to the conclusion, like, did I do something that could have harmed me? Could I have supported something that harmed my family, right?
You're talking about the vaccine.
Yeah, I'm talking about, that's right. And even all of it, right? Like the enforcement of masking mandates, like moms getting arrested for not wearing masks, or kids being tackled off of arenas, to think that you participated in that, thinking at the time that you were doing what was necessary, and now to look at evidence to show that that was completely false and fabricated and there was no evidence to support it, would be very difficult for a type A police officer to believe, right? The majority of police probably have in their mind, like, I'm serving my community, I'm willing to sacrifice my safety to protect others. And so to think that you were essentially used as a political tool would be very difficult to accept, especially in a country like Canada, right? We've never experienced that type of, I don't think we've experienced that before, right? Well, I mean, maybe a long time ago in our history, but not in my generation for sure, right? And like you, I mean, my dad was a member, both of my older brothers were members, like policing runs in my family, right? So I've never had a critical outlook on policing, but I definitely think we've fallen off the rails as a country, like you said, in many professions, policing being one of them. But if you have the enforcement arm, you can control the population, right?
Especially and friendly, nice Canadians who look up to the Mounties.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I appreciate that briefing, and we were talking about the truckers and the convoys, the Mounties, because that's the shadow hanging over us. That's the reason why there's a leadership here, because Aaron O'Toole mishandled that, and I think that his lack of opposition was critical. I mean, when every single political party on the ballot agrees on the central issue of the day, what even is the point of the election?
Well, I think if had he vocal in opposition, he would probably be the prime minister right now.
I think you're probably right. Why are you here? Are you a party member? Is that a new thing?
Yeah, it is.
Just to observe. Do you have political ambitions? How have you been treated here? I mean, tell me how. Are you an outsider of the party, or are you making inroads here?
Well, I'm new to being a signed up member of the Conservative Party. I did it because I chose to support Roman Baber because of his courageous stand that he took. Yep.
He's very principled.
Yes, and I was paying attention to what he was doing. You know, when he was on the cusp of getting kicked out of Doug Ford's government for speaking out, and so that's what drew me to him as an individual. Like I had, like many others, I was skeptical of the Conservatives because of such a lack of opposition, like you had mentioned. But I saw Roman, and he was going with this direction. And then I also thought Leslyn Lewis was pretty strong. And I mean, of course, Pierre Poilievre he's very popular. He's very sharp and articulate. He's always holding the Liberals to account, mostly on financial matters. And I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. That was his job, right? Finance critic. And he did a great job of it. So I was drawn mostly because of Roman. And then as I was paying attention, those were my top three candidates. They were the only three that I actually supported. And in that order, Roman, Leslyn, Pierre. And I think any single one of them could defeat Justin Trudeau in a general election, which I think is what is the ultimate goal.
Well, that's very interesting.
Glad to see you here.
But I don't have any political ambition.
Oh, God, I was going to ask you because you did make a name for yourself amongst the truckers and those who support them. Well, listen, thank you for stopping by Rebel News. It's been a very interesting night. And listen, I wish you well, and I hope to see you stay involved, whether it's as a commentator, as an organizer, or even in the party.
Thank you very much.
Right on. Nice to see you.
Take care.
There you have. Well, nice to meet you. I think we've done the show before, but that was via Skype. Yeah.